Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Want to talk about something to start off that angry again, and it's this book burning stuff that's just driving me nuts. Look, we can have a discussion if there's really something that you have a real problem with, and you can articulate that problem. Other than just no, that's not really an argument. And I'm pointing to Florida. Florida is at the center of the book banning, and look, it's happening all across the country. And this kind of stuff pops up occasionally when you want to rile up the dim. But this one gets my attention. Because if you remember 2021, the inauguration, Joe Biden's inauguration, had a young black woman poet, the youngest poet to read at a presidential inauguration since, I guess, since the Kennedy era and Robert Frost. But this woman, Amanda Gorman, read her speech, read her poem, and they published it and they put it in a whole bunch of schools because it's inspirational. I mean, I'm reading through it and I'm like, wow, I forgot, how inspirational this was. I watched it, but I don't remember it being, this uplifting until I read it. The reason I bring this up, Florida and book banning and this woman's poem, because you know where this is going, right? Some idiot challenged it, and the school, acquiesced. You look at Miami-Dade County, the public school, their fourth largest school district in the by enrollment in the entire nation. Evidently, they've moved. They've said they haven't banned it. It's not completely out of the school. No, we didn't take it all the way out. Evidently, it's in a media center. I'm going to guess behind glass and a lock and key and in a vault, so where no one can ever get to it. And the reason I bring this up is the challenge that was issued. Again, if you make a cogent argument about why something is bad, and look, there's some things that have some sexual content for younger readers that you might go, yeah, there's a problem here. Maybe we should push this off. And I'm with you on some of that. Some of it. But this one, oh boy, it took a lot of time to fill this one out. Took a lot of time. Question number one, what do you object? Now you expect, right? You would expect it to be, well, I didn't like this, and I think this is bad, and this is bad, and you would expect that, right? Left this part blank. Don't know why this person objects to this poem being in the public school. The number two, why do you object to this material? It's not educational and have indirectly hate messages. What? It is not educational and have indirectly hate messages. So looked at page 12 and 13. I didn't see it. Other than maybe that this is a black woman who read the poem and that her name's on the, that's all I could come up with. Question three, did you review all the material? Simple yes. Are you aware of professional reviews on this material? I don't need it. What strength do you perceive in this material? Blank. For what age group would you recommend this material? Not for schools. So this woman's poem that she read to the entire country at a presidential inauguration in front of millions of people should not be in schools at all. Not just saying, hey, I don't think this is for kindergartners. I don't think this is for first graders. Not that they could read it, but not at all. Not at all. Not for schools. It's bad. It's bad for schools. What do you believe is the function of this material? Cause confusion and indoctrinate students. Oh, in its place, what material would you recommend that would result in the same outcome? Blank. That's the entire form. Now, a thoughtful person might go, have a, something that you could point to that goes, oh, there's a problem here. My problem is with the school district for even looking at this. So one person, just one person, can make a complaint and have this book moved away from people. Now you go, well, what horrible things did this writer have to say? Simply ask the question, where can we find light in this never-ending shade the loss? And she talks about, history. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. I know that's offensive, isn't it? Oh my gosh. She writes that even as we grieve, we grew. Even as we hurt, we hoped. Even as we tried. That will forever be tied together victorious. Not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Oh my goodness. They're indoctrinating children to get along? Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we are to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. Oh my goodness. Maybe this is what it was. There's something about religion in there. Maybe that's what upset her. Now I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. But heaven forbid that we talk about coming together and not fighting and killing each other, and that we build bridges. Heaven forbid. I know this is not the conservative message, which could be part of it. The author writes, for while we have our eyes on the future, our history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. That must be that R word that they don't understand. And the thing that gets me is none of this is outrageous. If we merge mercy with might and might with rights, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. I know that's horrible. Horrible, isn't it? Concluding with, we will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there was always light, if only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. How offensive. This is offensive. Has to be taken out of the schools. And again, I come back to it's the loudest, it's the most ridiculous, it's the most violent people who get, it's always the squeaky wheel getting the grease. And I look at this and I'm going, what kind of crazy lunatic would do this? Oh yeah, our Moms for Liberty groups, because it's not about the poem, it's not about a book, it's not about any of this. It's about intimidation. It's about showing force that we're gonna put you in your place, and we're gonna shut down any education. Because heaven forbid we want critical thinking students. Heaven forbid we want, critical thinking adults to lead this country into the future. Heaven forbid. And as I said, the loud and the crazy, they're winning because we're not speaking up. There aren't enough of us speaking up and saying, this is outrageous. This is ridiculous. I point to Target. Target evidently is now the new Bud Light. Evidently in their stores they had LGBTQ stuff. I don't know what. But there was stuff promoting Pride Month or whatever it is that they're doing. This blows my mind, and I wish this would happen in front of me. Evidently, you get these kooks and these nitwits going into these stores and berating the workers because there's something on the shelf that they don't like. Look, I go into the grocery store and they've got broccoli. They've got asparagus. They've got cauliflower. They've got a whole bunch of stuff I don't like. And do you know what I do? I walk right by it. Doesn't matter to me at all. But this is not about the merchandise. This is about the point. This is about showing their force. This is about the violence of being in someone's face. And Target is acquiescing. Target is backing down, and this is what they do. Because look, they don't want their workers abused. They don't want their workers yelled at. They don't want them intimidated. They want people who are barely making minimum wage to do their job and go home without the kind of harassment that this. And I got to tell you, I wish this would happen in front of me. Because what is wrong with somebody who would do this to these workers? Now, good on Gavin Newsom, who has called out Target for being, for saying, look, explain this to me. Why is this? Why are you doing this? Stand up to bullies. We used to be a country that stood up to bullies. And these people are bullies. Because there's only a handful of them. Look, they're the loudest. They get the most attention. They're well funded by billionaires. But there are more sane, rational people in this country to stop this kind of nonsense. Look, the LGBTQ stuff, not my issue. Not at all. But this is going back to the old labor frame of an injury to one being an injury to all. If you're going to go after these folks, eventually, I know I'm on the list. I know we're all on the list because you can never be pure enough. You can never be, free from crazy. For instance, there's a state representative in Tennessee. Her name is Susan Lynn. And as the one group calls her, the Republican from QAnon, she's thrilled that the company she works for, the almost 300 people, they're no longer going to shop at Target. Not with the company's credit card. No. The company's going to show Target. How dare they put glitter scarves on the shelves? How dare they put size 13 pink pumps? How dare. I don't even know that they've got those things, to be honest. But this is where sane, rational people have got to vote people like Susan Lynn out in Tennessee, if you're listening, and the rest of the Republican establishment who uses this to divide, uses this to tear us apart. It's time. It's time for us to say enough already and to stand up to bullies wherever they are. And again, here's the thing. Please, if you're dumb enough to go into a Target and yell at the clerk over something like this, please do it in front of me. Oh, because I so want to be there so that I can mock and humiliate you just as much as you deserve. But I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast. Quick break. Right back.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our...
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Let's quick go to the phones. Got Kurt on line 1 from Akron. Kurt, what's on your mind, brother? I guess Kurt went off the line. Yeah, no, it happens. I'm sure that that Ron DeSantis is changing his mind on what should be the future of his campaign. I'm sure that I'm pretty sure that he's changing where he should be where he should be doing it, because if you think about it, I think he thought he was going to shock the world by going over to Twitter. Turns out, not so good. Got about 500,000 people, I guess, to show up on Twitter for his big announcement. He was announcing he's going to be president, going to run for president. Now, had he gone over to Fox, he'd probably gotten 3 million views and a whole bunch of stuff like that. Had he used one of the ABC, NBC, CBS, one of those, probably got 6-8 million views, probably more. Probably gotten more at CNN. And the thing is here's a guy who's probably the most unlikable guy to begin with, and he does it in an audio-only format on Twitter. And there's just so much fun to go with that, because look, what Twitter showed is that Elon Musk, what happened today, Elon Musk spent $44 billion proving that Twitter doesn't have any reach, that he has destroyed it. And as I've said, anyone with a blue check mark, anyone who is paying him, you should drop that immediately, because there isn't much left. Now, understand, this was supposed to be Musk taking over for Murdoch. This was supposed to be Musk taking over and running the media gamut. This was supposed to be him, getting the juice, man. This was supposed to be him leading the message. And well, not so much. And it's been kind of bad for him because it didn't work today. So and he's been taking a beating on all the people that they fired. Maybe those people could have helped. Now, the weird thing is DeSantis did this in an audio-only format, which made me think, look, he's not a likable guy. He's kind of dorky and awkward. So maybe that was, hey, we're going to go back 80 years and do a fireside chat on the radio. Okay, that's not how elections are run today, but good luck on that. But it got me to thinking, here's a guy who, if you remember George W. Bush, everyone was like, I'd like to have a beer with that guy. And same thing with Trump. Yeah, I'd like to have a beer with that guy. That's kind of the Republican voters' frame. Yeah, he's a good guy. I'd like to have a beer with him. I don't know anyone who's going to want to have a beer with Ron DeSantis. I just don't. But the launch crashed. Let's go to the phone. It's got Alice on line too. Alice, how you doing?
I'm doing.
You're not totally insane?
Borderline.
What's on your mind?
I think the problem going on is we're tired of the right-wingers, but a majority of us have that light and love thing going where it's, if we just send them light and love and are understanding, they'll stop.
No.
They're never going to stop.
No, there's only one way to take out a bully. A bully only understands one thing, and that's force. You got to stand up to the bullies.
Absolutely. I used to tell my son, and I told my grandkids, and in fact, my granddaughter, who looks and acts like me, picked it right up when she was 4. But I used to tell them there are some people that do not understand common courtesy, and they see it as a sign of weakness, and unfortunately, the only thing they understand is a punch in the mouth. And it's true. So, yeah, I think, sooner or later, people are going to have to wake up and go, you know what? We're going to have to just stand up, tell them, shut up, sit down, and throw hissy fits. Because otherwise, we're going to be back in the Middle Ages. But have a good evening, Rick.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate the call. No, I mean, the sad reality is that there's only one way to stop this. And that's for all of us, the sane, the rational, the silent majority, to go to the ballot box and throw these bums out, every single one of them. And starting with Trump, if he's elected, he truthed out today, and this is the most bizarre thing that I've seen. He says, quote, Rob, in quotation marks, Rob. I think he meant Ron. I'm gonna give him a pass for misspelling. Maybe his finger was no, never mind. He says, Rob, my red button is bigger, better, stronger, and is working. Truth. He tried to remind everybody that he's talking about Truth. His Truth Social. Yours does not. And then in parentheses, he writes, per my conversation with Kim Jong-un of North Korea, soon to become my friend. I don't know what any of that means. But this guy's going to run to be president. And look, his numbers are double that of DeSantis's. I don't think DeSantis is the guy. I think if Trump doesn't end up in jail, it's going to be him. But DeSantis is one of those guys that I'm sorry. He just doesn't have a personality. And he the Republican refrain has always been, there's a guy I want to have a beer with. This ain't that guy. Now, the rich people, there are some rich people who are backing him, who have a, what did they say, a $200 million budget they're planning on putting together? So a $200 million budget to run DeSantis for president. I'm going, wow, that's a lot of money. Now, you remember at the very beginning, Jeb Bush, $50 million to start his, and you saw how quickly he flamed out. So I'm going to be interested to see how this plays out, because DeSantis is doing all of the fascistic kind of crazy things that I think the extreme of the extreme right wants. I don't think most Republicans really understand how far their party has gone off the rails. But DeSantis is the guy who will give the crazy of the crazy everything that they want. I just don't think that the rest of the party is there yet. Now, again, for me, this whole thing that Musk has got to be losing his mind, and the woman who's the new CEO, this Linda Yarcino, she's got to be really losing her mind because she gave up a really lucrative gig to come take what is now. Because if you're an advertiser, the birdcage is open. They pulled the curtain back on Twitter. There's literally nothing there. And for Elon Musk's 120 million followers, you go, really? How many of those are made up? How much of that is BS? I'm gonna say the bird flew the coop. If you got a blue check, if I'm you, I'm saving my $8 a month because you're just throwing it down the hole. Want to hear your thoughts, though? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1959. That was the day Operation Humanity marched in support of New York City hospital workers fighting for union recognition and bargaining rights at area voluntary hospitals. Workers organizing with Local 1199 had been on strike since May 8th and called on the public to support them in their efforts. They pointed out that the 30,000 overwhelmingly black and Latino workers were fighting against economic exploitation and discrimination. Striking workers condemned their paltry wages, which averaged $21 less a week than workers at city hospitals. They added they had no job security or benefits and were not even eligible for unemployment. The Central Labor Council, the NAACP, and area civil rights activists all supported the march. In their book, Upheaval in the Quiet Zone, Leon Fink and Brian Greenberg note that a union largely led by Jews had squared off against hospitals directed by the scions of the city's Jewish community, to the degree that it was a family affair. The 1959 fight thus took on the bitterness of a civil war. As well, Catholic trade union leaders decried the anti-union fervor of hospitals run by the Archdiocese. Fink and Greenberg illustrate the support of fiery Mike Quill, president of TWU Local 100, who denounced hospital trustees as worse than famed segregationist Governor Orville Faubus of Arkansas. Weeks into the strike, area trade unions supplied reinforcements in the form of donations, loans, and groceries. Local IBEW members assessed themselves $1 a week for the strikers. Many unions regularly joined picket lines in support. Though the strike would fail to secure union recognition and collective bargaining rights, there were minimal gains. Solidarity galvanized the membership for future battles. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
It's an odd marketing strategy for an industry to assail its own customers. Yet, that's what the monopolistic meatpacking industry, led by such huge conglomerates as Tyson, Smithfield, JBS, and Hormel, that control nearly 70% of America's pork market, is doing. Just shut up and eat your bacon, the industry shrieks. The target of their corporate tantrum is the growing grassroots movement of consumers, animal rights advocates, farmers, and others who are dismayed and disgusted by big pork's profiteering on animal cruelty. None of your business, shout the executives, lobbyists, lawyers, and far-right politicians who run the torturous system. But gutsy groups like the Humane Society made their way inside the industry's animal factories, videoing such mass horrors as thousands of pregnant sows locked for 16 weeks at a time in gestation crates so small the animals can't even turn around. In 2018, such exposés prompted 60% of California voters to approve a ballot initiative outlawing the use of these inhumane crates. Adding plutocratic stupidity to their greed, the pork barons then sued the people for overreaching their power. Yes, the pork profiteers actually asserted that democracy, i.e. people power, must not interfere with, quote, sound business practices. Never mind that few of us uncorporatized commoners consider animal suffering to be a sound practice. Even the corporate coddling Supreme Court gagged at the industry's claim that it has the sovereign power to dictate what type of pork chops are available to the public. This month, in an odd-fellow 5-4 decision rendered by 2 progressive judges and 3 corporatists, the court ruled that policy choices like these usually belong to the people. Well, yes, and to the animals. This is Jim Hightower saying, here's an example of how grassroots activism matters in important ways. To stay involved, go to humanesociety.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, another story out of Florida. Evidently, a woman driving, I think the report said 6 kids, was shot and killed by, I guess it's a road rage incident. The other person involved, there's some kind of dispute, but the guy shoots this woman while driving 6 kids. And again, we have this stuff happen. You know, this is now welcome to America. This is what happens. But in this case, my mind went to this place of, you know, if all 6 of those kids had guns and the woman had a gun, there would be 7 guns against 1. And if I use Jon Stewart's, theory of more guns, more safety, this would be peak safety. These people should have been safe, right? I know, it sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous. But what else can we come up with? Thoughts and prayers ain't working anymore. And today is the 1-year anniversary of the deadly shooting in Uvalde, Texas. And there are 2 things I remember. 1, cops didn't do anything while the gunfire was going on. And 2, and my heart breaks thinking about it, is the family had to identify their child simply by finding the green shoes, the green tennis shoes. That just heartbreaking. And here to share some thoughts on just how crazy all of this is, I've asked Nick Wilson to come talk with us. Nick is the Senior Director of the Gun Violence Prevention Program at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, their website. Nick, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick, on this solemn occasion.
So, I'm looking at this, and I got to tell you, it didn't get any better. For all of these horrible tragedies, one piled on top of another, you would think maybe we would do something, but it ain't happening.
It's easy to feel pessimistic, especially considering places like Texas after the shooting in Uvalde a year ago, and just in the past month and a half, we've had the Cleveland, Texas shooting, and then the Outlet Mall shooting in Allen, Texas, and still, these kind of MAGA Republicans are still afraid to stand up to the gun lobby and do something. But I am optimistic that although it shouldn't have taken such a horrible tragedy of 19 children shot, plus 2 teachers, plus the perpetrator's grandmother to die. Congress did finally pass its first meaningful gun violence prevention bill in 30 years. It didn't go far enough, but a lot of it, we were seeing some effects of those implementation. And we've seen some states, that are honestly more Democratic controlled, like Michigan and Minnesota, really passing these life-saving legislation, and states like New York finding ways to support gun violence survivors. So it's a mixed bag. The red states are getting redder at weakening gun laws, and we're seeing more of those tragic shootings like in Florida that you mentioned. But we're seeing progress, at least in a lot of blue states.
The president tweeted out today that since Uvalde, in the last year, our country has experienced more than 650 mass shootings and well over 40,000 deaths due to gun violence. He says we cannot end this epidemic until Congress passes common sense gun safety laws that keep weapons of war off our streets and out of dangerous hands. We've been hearing this refrain for years now. It doesn't seem to be getting us anywhere yet, and I know you said you're optimistic. I don't think I'm as optimistic as you are, especially on days like today and these anniversaries that just seem to be coming day after day after day of remembering how big of a failure we've been in addressing this.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely frustration from the gun violence prevention movement. Things like the assault weapon ban that the whole movement and survivors have rallied around. We still can't get all the Democrats in the Senate to support it. But it's been nice to have President Biden be a very vocal champion. He realized he cares about the issue, but he also realized that it's a winning issue, and people that support gun safety, and especially young people, came out to the polls in the midterms. And so we're going to keep putting pressure on both Democrats and Republicans to really stand up to the gun lobby and pass common sense gun laws.
What do you say to the person, though, Nick, who goes, you know what, hey, this is just the price of living in a free country where we have the right to bear arms. This is just it's our Constitution. This is just the reality. There's nothing we can do about this, and banning guns is not the answer. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I think it's, I talk to people that, they come up and they're like, we completely are opposed to everything. You're gun grabbers, Second Amendment. And it's pretty easy within a couple of minutes to find common ground that, we're not trying to take anyone's guns away. But we do know that there's research-based ways to reduce the risk of so many guns in our country. And, basic going through a background check, if you're going to carry a gun, show that you've done live fire training and safety training and know the laws. People realize that there are, reasonable restrictions we can put on, just like for cars, you have to have insurance and a license and take a test. We're just asking for reasonable accommodations for the leading cause of death for children in the country.
So let me ask you this, because I read a really good op-ed over at the New York Times. A guy had studied gun instructors, and he said that, and this is the thing that I've known from the beginning, is that the people in this gun world, the people who I call gun fetishists, they're afraid of around every corner. Fear is in every moment of their life. They believe around every corner there's a bad guy. They can't go to the bathroom without their gun, which is why you saw cases recently of a guy not answering his doorbell, just shooting somebody, or someone pulls into the driveway and shooting, because they've got it in their head that around every corner is danger, every stranger's danger. I don't know that training them is going to help get them to a place of being safer with guns. I fear we're going to be sending more people into that mill to train them that, hey, you can't go to the bathroom without your gun. You can't go into the store or to the restaurant or your kid's birthday party. Got to have it right there. I fear we're feeding people into that machine. I'm curious your thoughts.
That's an excellent point. And my mind instantly went to, the criminal justice reform movement talks a lot about police training. But if they're being trained to be afraid of every interaction, partly because guns are everywhere, we see more people reaching for their gun as opposed to de-escalating or using less lethal force. And so if we continue to have these instructors, and unfortunately, you have to almost always be an NRA instructor, and there's this incentive, and there's the NRA and the gun lobby have really worked over the past decade to really use fear to sell more guns as more people move to the cities and less hunting and sportsmanship has become less part of everyday culture for Americans. They needed to find ways to make more money, and they could do that by selling fear. And they hired an ad agency to help them figure out, how do we sell guns to people that never wanted to buy guns before. And they came up with something literally called weaponless Wendy, and how they need to go after women, saying that they're going to be in danger, and the only way they protect themselves is with a gun. And now, since some of the shootings and anti-Asian hate, like Monterey Park, we've seen that they're targeting the Asian American community, saying like, you need to buy guns to protect yourselves from the white supremacists that we're selling guns to. And it's this fear that really is leading to these senseless violence when people, would rather shoot before asking any questions.
Yeah, I mean, because I think some of our other laws we've got to be looking into, like these idiotic stand your ground laws. To me, this is a giant driver of some of this, in my view, as well. Because hey, I got the right to stand my ground. I don't have to back up, and I blame this on the jury in Florida, oddly enough, for the George Zimmerman thing. I mean, when I was a kid, and I don't know how old you are, but when I was a kid, if you started a fight and you got beat up, you deserved it. There was no, hey, I had to shoot them because now I was afraid. No, you got beat up because you were stupid. Now we're telling people you can cause trouble, you can start an altercation, and oh, gee, I felt afraid. Now I got to shoot them. There's something screwed up with that kind of a law.
Exactly. And after the Zimmerman case, people got politically very upset, and it stopped happening for a while. And now these MAGA states have dusting them off, and they're being passed in more and more states. And no one on our side is saying that you don't have a right to defend yourself, but if you can retreat or let the other person retreat, and you shouldn't go out looking for trouble, that's not okay. And sometimes even they're breaking the law, but they feel like they have a license to kill because they think that you can just shoot anytime. And so it's become a real concern. And to reference the case in Miami that you mentioned, Florida recently passed permitless carry. There's now 26 states where you can carry a firearm without any license, any background check, any proof that you've ever fired a gun, that you know when to retreat, when you can stand your ground. And it's leading to road rage instances or people picking a fight. We've seen incidences where two people will be driving, they're both armed, and one will get mad, and so they'll start shooting each other, and they hit their children in the back seat. And these are completely, before you would have yelled, honked, or given the finger, and now children are dying because there's a lot of anger, and we don't know how to communicate, and we all have guns with us.
Yeah, that sounds like a great recipe. And also take it into the bars with you. Sounds like a lot of fun, as long as I'm not the one in the middle of it, because this is where my problem then becomes. I don't mind if two idiots are throwing shots at each other. I don't care. This is how we thin the herd. This is how you get rid of the dumb people. My problem is they're both bad shots, and you pointed out the one story that I point to often. These two idiots are shooting at each other, and they shot each other's kids. That would be my luck. I'd be the one getting shot by both of them. I'd be the one dying, and they go, oh, well, that happens. Living in a free country.
And they're using their assault weapons, saying it's great for self-defense, but the velocity of the bullet means it's going through a wall and hitting someone else next door. It's ridiculous when people are thinking that they're in a movie and they are being the hero with a gun.
So if you had your druthers, Nick, and you're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Nick Wilson, he's the senior director of the Gun Violence Prevention Program there at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, the website if you want to check out the work that they do. If you had your magic wand, what should Joe Biden do? What would you move forward on that you think would help us cut down on the number of gun deaths? Because you're never going to stop them entirely, right? It's never going to end, but we could diminish some of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what would you do?
There's a lot of, we've been seeing a lot of exciting legislation passing at the state level, which allows us to hold the gun industry accountable. The NRA got Congress years ago to write in an exemption that gives them more protections from lawsuits than any other industry in the country. So when a gun violence, survivor can't even get their day in court because of negligent practices from a dealer or a manufacturer, they can't even get their day in court. And the way we've gotten car crashes and other kind of consumer hazards safer and the deaths down is that we've we've used lawsuits to require airbags and seatbelts and common safety devices, but those are not available to the gun industry. And so we've been calling on Congress and President Biden to repeal these special immunities. President Biden, I believe he's been doing all he can with executive orders. His last one really challenged the ATF to get as close to universal background checks as possible by not allowing all these people that are selling at gun shows and online and saying, "Oh, I'm not a gun dealer. I just sell a couple hundred guns a year for a profit." Make them actually have to keep records and follow the laws. And so there's a few things that are happening. One thing he's doing that he can do without Congress is doing more to support gun violence survivors. There's a lot of, after these shootings, there's not a lot of access to paying for medical bills, for trauma recovery, mental health, and the long costs over the years and the trauma that you see in communities like Uvalde, like Buffalo, that are transformed after these mass shootings. That you need more than just a couple of months of resources. We need insane investments because the trauma just recycles the violence. And so I know that's something that the administration is working on, and we're hoping to see more money invested in preventing the next shooting by supporting our communities now.
Yeah, I don't know how you get through something like this, and I know as one survivor told me, you get up. I mean, you don't have a choice. But I don't know how, as a parent, having to identify your child by the tennis shoes that they wear, I don't know how you wake up the next morning and move forward after having that happen to you.
Just today, next month is Gun Violence Survivors Month, and I brought in a couple mothers from Baltimore. One have lost two sons to gun violence, one whose son was having a mental health crisis, Kevin Cooper, and the police shot him. They were afraid of his child. And just, it's heartbreaking to hear their stories, but it's so important that we keep their children's memories alive and that they use their stories to help prevent the next parent from having to go through that tragedy. And so I'm really inspired every day, and that gives me motivation to keep working, even though sometimes it's very easy to get frustrated with the Supreme Court or the Senate. But we know in the long run we're going to win with the young people, and as more gun violence unfortunately impacts more and more of us, we're going to have an unstoppable mass to start passing these laws.
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, you hear about these police shootings, and I try and put myself in their position. With the amount of gun violence going on, the number of guns on the streets, this idea that there's danger around every corner. You got these itchy trigger finger people. I have some sympathy for policemen. I do, and as I've said a million times, I support the police wholeheartedly when they're not wrong. They have to be held accountable when they are, because we do give them so much privilege and so much power. But I got to tell you, the fact that there are so many guns, I don't know how we get to, and I love the way Jon Stewart put it, when do we get to peak safety? And I joked, I shouldn't have joked, but I made the statement earlier, that if the 6 kids in that car would have had guns, maybe the woman wouldn't have died, which is insane to think that way, but there are people who do.
Yeah, part of the reason why we've seen this uptick in violence the past few years, and luckily it's finally trending downwards, but it was because there were guns everywhere. And the major city chiefs of police officers around the country have actually been much more vocal, even in deep red states, because they know that they're the ones that are responsible for keeping us safe, and they're the ones that are, might be outgunned by these individuals. And so, it's important that we support law enforcement, because they really have had their hands tied by a lot of these preemption laws and lack of regulations.
Yeah. Any actions? Let's finish up on the action. Anything we can do to help keep ourselves and others safe? Any action?
There's several things you can do. If you want to get more political, now's the time to call your senators and congressmen to support the assault weapon ban. A lot of the most exciting work is really happening at the state level, and in most states there are great statewide groups that you can join and learn more about how easy it is to testify in your state legislator, or to write a letter or call someone. And honestly, if you live in a community where a lot of gun owners, you can help save lives by if you know someone is they got laid off, or they're going through a divorce, they're going through a tough time. and you're worried about them, maybe say, hey, can I temporarily take those firearms and keep them for safekeeping? We're not going to get the cops or the courts involved, but I just know that having a gun can be a risk, and if someone is in temporary crisis, maybe we can remove those firearms and help save a life, because suicide is one of the leading problems that we don't talk about enough.
No, now I'm thinking about all the people I know who have arsenals, and I'm imagining that conversation. They would probably shoot me, but it's one of those things. Nick, I appreciate the time. Good stuff. I hope you keep up the work. Hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
I'd love to. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks so much, Nick Wilson. He is the Senior Director of Gun Violence Prevention there at the Center for American Progress. AmericanProgress.org, the website, if you want to check out the work that they do. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1949. That was the day that a shotgun blast broke through a closed window and struck Victor Reuther as he sat reading a newspaper in his living room. Victor, along with his brothers Walter and Roy, were leaders of the United Auto Workers Union, one of the most powerful forces of the 20th century U.S. labor movement. During the 1930s, the three brothers moved to Detroit and became involved in the hard-fought efforts to bring unions to the Motor City. Victor got a job at the Kesley Hayes Wheel Company. He joined UAW Local 174. During the Flint sit-down strike against General Motors, Victor gave speeches to help rally the strikers. According to Mike Smith of Wayne State University, Victor, quote, had this deep resonating voice. He coupled that with a superb control of the language. And when he got up to give a speech, it was usually a beauty. Victor would go on to become the UAW's education director and international director. Roy took up the role of legislative director. Walter became the union's president. Their union leadership made many enemies for the three Reuther brothers. Walter was the victim of a gunshot attack in 1948 that permanently injured one of his arms. The next year, an unknown would-be assassin took aim at Victor. The blast hit Victor in the face. He lost his right eye, and the bullet smashed his jaw and collarbone. In his memoir, Victor wrote that he told the surgeon, quote, "They can take out my eye and take of an arm or a leg, but please fix up my tongue. I've got a living to make." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
I was standing by gate 4 when I heard the people roar. They ain't gonna kick the auto workers around. It's that UAW-CIO.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. Look, this gun thing, at some point you've got to deal with a whole bunch of things. It's not just, hey, we're just going to ban guns. It's never going to happen. But, and then we didn't get into this, but, the reality is we see these kids getting shot all the time. Oh, there was a gun just laying around and the 4-year-old shot the 1-year-old. And does anybody go to jail? No. Oh, grandma was driving, the grandchild to daycare and, just slung her gun over the back of the seat. And the kid grabbed the gun and shot her through the does anybody, any accountability? I mean, this is the weird thing. There used to be a Republican Party that believed in responsibility. This is my frustration of the moment that we're in. Nobody wants to be responsible for anything. They want to point their finger at everybody else and blame everything, but nobody's taking responsibility for it. I mean, we're in the middle of this debt ceiling nonsense. I mean, this is really just stupid. And yet you've got a Republican Party who they're willing to crash this economy. I was having a conversation today with somebody who does investments, and they're like, oh, don't worry about it. They'll come, they do this all the time. The 11th hour, they'll come up with a deal. It's not going to be a big deal. I'm going, are you so sure? Because a lot of people are not. Will Biden cave? Because the only way I see there being a deal happening is if Biden caves. And the weird thing is there was just a Monmouth poll that came out and said half the country say that they feel they understand what raising the debt ceiling or not raising the debt ceiling means and what it would mean if we didn't. Half. I'm surprised that half are arrogant enough to think that they know, because I don't. What I do know is it's bad. I do know what happens when you don't pay your bills. I do know what happens when interest rates go up. I do know what happens when the brakes are slammed on and there isn't money going into families' pockets. I do kind of have a sense of what's going on. And there's part of me that goes, half the country doesn't know. Well, they're going to find out soon. Better save some rice and beans. Because the sad reality is, I truly believe our Republican friends don't care. They don't. They don't care what happens to your family. I say it all the time. Republicans hate working people. Look at the policies that they move. Look at the proposals that they've put forth and the things that they want to cut. Think of how deep and painful what Republicans are proposing is. This is what just angers me to no end. And the question is, how much longer are we going to put up with this kind of division? The red hat, blue hat stuff. When are we going to come back to the middle of the road and go, you know what? We've got some spending issues that maybe we should be looking at. At the barrel of a gun, that's not how you do that. Ready to crash not just our economy, but the global economy. Probably not the best place for that. And again, I go back to, this argument that I've heard from conservatives going, the China, be afraid of China and the BRIC countries, China, Russia, India, and Brazil. Be afraid of them because they're coming up with their own currency, and we should be concerned about that. In fact, we should be so concerned that we don't do dumb stuff like this. This is the kind of stuff that adds instability to a global economy. Not good. And I'm not an economist. It just doesn't make any sense. This isn't how you run a lemonade stand. But again, we have unserious people in Congress. Lauren Boebert in her comment, well, birth control was too expensive, so I'll have a kid because it's cheaper. What kind of GED math is that? Look, I got 3 kids. They're expensive. I don't know what good enough diploma, math course that was, but she's wrong. She shouldn't be in Congress. But there they are, bringing all their ridiculous ideas. And who suffers? We do. That's my problem. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
These states essentially agreed to take less water from the Colorado River.
Western states reach landmark agreement to stave off multi-decade drought crisis. World's lakes are shrinking due to human overuse and climate change. Plus,
last year's election in November changed everything.
Minnesota legislature poised to enact landmark environment and climate legislation.
All of those landmarks and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
It is the #1 challenge in the world. A civilizational challenge, unprecedented in scale and scope. And it is really striking that as we begin the official 2024 campaign, this issue, the most important one, the central civilizational challenge of our time, is utterly and completely absent and ignored from all Republican political campaign discourse.
Mission accomplished. This is your Green News Report.
Republicans don't care. Truly do not care if we melt the earth.
Okay, Desi Doyen, big news. We've been talking about this now for a few months, the water wars, if you will, out west. Now, maybe a truce?
Maybe. The Colorado River Basin states have agreed to cuts in water use to prevent the river from running dry amid an historic mega drought, the Bureau of Reclamation announced on Monday. California, Arizona, and Nevada have agreed to cut back on river water use by 13% over the next 3 years. That will be split up among farmers, tribes, and cities in exchange for more than $1 billion in compensation from the federal government, funded by the Inflation Reduction Act.
So if you give me money, then I won't drink water?
No, if you give me money, then I won't plant these really expensive, thirsty crops. Because remember, agriculture is the primary user of the Colorado River.
Good point.
The cuts are necessary to preserve the operation of rapidly declining western reservoirs, Lake Mead and Lake Powell. If finalized after a federal environmental review, this short-term deal would bridge the gap until the really difficult negotiations of allocating what is left of the Colorado River, which are set to start in 2026.
So this gets us through to 2026, at least. That's good. And all of this made possible, really, because we had a really wet winter out here for a change in California.
It certainly helped a lot for this negotiation, but it's not going to last much longer.
Okay, Little Miss Negative.
In Colorado, despite the ongoing mega drought, a new analysis shows that fossil fuel companies in the state actually doubled their withdrawals of the state's freshwater resources for fracking over the last 10 years. And that even as oil and gas production declined in the state. Data obtained by nonprofit group Frack Tracker Alliance also found that Colorado's drillers generated enough wastewater to supply their own fracking operations without draining the state's precious freshwater resources.
They just don't care.
Globally, the world's lakes are shrinking. A new study found that nearly 2,000 of the world's largest lakes have shrunk by trillions of gallons of water per year since 1992. The researchers say the decline of lakes is primarily attributable to human overuse and human-caused climate change, intensifying drought and shifting rainfall patterns. Even in regions seeing more extreme rainfall, the drier, hotter atmosphere generated by global warming is sucking up even more water through evaporation. Competition for declining lake water has major implications for agriculture, power plants, and drinking water around the world.
So let the water wars continue, I guess.
But some good news, the Environmental Protection Agency has moved to close a loophole that exempted hundreds of toxic coal ash waste dumps around the nation from clean water regulations. For the first time, utility companies would be forced to clean up toxic coal ash waste generated by burning coal for electricity. Studies have shown coal ash waste impoundments are leaching toxic heavy metals into groundwater supplies. The EPA also proposed new rules to crack down on polluted wastewater from coal-burning power plants that is dumped into rivers. Finally, Minnesota lawmakers have agreed to enact historic environment and climate legislation that invests more than $2 billion to decarbonize the state and accelerate its clean energy transition. It also addresses environmental justice and includes the toughest regulations on PFAS forever chemicals in the country. The funding will go to solarize schools and public buildings, electrify homes, incentivize electric vehicles, build an EV charging network, and more. Here's Ellen Anderson, a former state legislator who now heads the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy.
It's the most transformational year we've had in climate and energy policy. It's a game-changing year that we're having at the state capitol in terms of our approach to climate and energy and what we're doing to move our state forward dramatically.
It's amazing what you can do when you get rid of gerrymandering and the people get to vote for who they want and they end up voting for Democrats and a whole bunch of stuff gets fixed. Imagine that.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So there's a new study out by the good folks over at the Institute for Policy Studies and Jobs for Justice. This is, I think, their third installment. And it got me thinking, when you think about retirement and CEOs, the most outrageous one that I ever remember was Jack Welch, the GE CEO, who for his entire life, he would get fresh flowers in several homes, had tickets to the Knicks, to the Red Sox, to the Yankees, could do the U.S. Open. He had a list. And the only reason people found out about it is his wife divorced him and wanted half of what he was getting of that. And you found all of these perks, get to use the jet, have an office that they paid for, just all kinds of stuff that they gave this one guy. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars of stuff while they were literally stealing their workers' pensions. And it really is, in this country, it is the two Americas, and retirement security being one of those. That's why I've asked the author of, one of the co-authors of the report, A Tale of Two Retirements, why CEOs get bigger retirement subsidies than the rest of us. Scott Klinger is a senior equitable development specialist there with Jobs with Justice, jwj.org, the website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure, Rick.
So, surprise. The CEOs are lining their pockets while screwing over their workers. Shocked I am. Shocked, I tell you.
Yeah, well, this isn't a new story. As you mentioned, this is our third installment of it. The first one was 10 years ago when 100 CEOs got together during a time of concern about the federal deficit, and their idea was to cut Social Security. So there's another old story. They called their thing Fix the Debt, and my co-author Sarah Anderson and I decided we would try to thwart their efforts. Even though they spent $30 million, we were successful, and we did so by pointing out how much these 100 wealthy CEOs, all men, had in their retirement accounts, and it was extraordinary.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the names. I'm looking at some of the names on here and some of the outrageous amounts of money that they've put in tax deferred and the benefits that they get. And it's eye-popping when you look at this stuff.
Yeah, so this year we decided to focus on low-wage employers and see what their CEOs had in their tax deferred retirement accounts. Now, there's two different sets of rules. One for ordinary people like us. If we're lucky enough to have a 401k at work, we can contribute $22,500 a year and have that deducted from our income and not pay taxes on it until we cash out in our retirement years. But CEOs have a different set of rules, a different plan, and they have unlimited amounts of deductions. And some of them have quite a lot. The highest one we found was the CEO of a home building company called NVR. They're the creators of Ryan Homes. And their CEO had $488 million in his tax-deferred retirement account, which was enough to give him a $3 million retirement check when he turned 65.
Every month?
Every month, correct. And so we tried to look at companies and then compare them to workers. Our most striking story was Walmart, whose CEO has a retirement account large enough that will give him $1 million check a month. He's kind of poor compared to the home builder guy.
Yeah, $169 million he's got.
$169 million. And Walmart told its shareholders that in its proxy statement that gets sent to every shareholder every year. They filed a separate report with the Department of Labor talking about their 401k plan. And Walmart has enrolled each and every member of its staff in the 401k plan, including part-timers, which is an admirable thing to some extent. But they pay their workers so little that 46% of their workforce can't afford to contribute to those plans, and therefore they don't get any of the company match, and they have zero balances. So the boss has $1 million a month coming in retirement. 46% of the workers have nothing and will get zilch other than their Social Security. And their average median wage at Walmart is $27,136 last year. That means half the workers made less than that.
Yeah, I was going to say, you said if individual could put $22,000 a year away. You know, 27 grand is what they make there. You know, you're not maxing that out. Why? What's the rationale to give CEOs an unlimited, you know, a no cap investment at no tax rate? What's the rationale? I mean, I get why you want you do it with a 401k. You want people to invest money, especially you know, middle income people, to use as a tax deduction. But I don't understand why the unlimited. That makes no sense to me.
There is no sense to it, and that's one of the things we call into question. And one of our conclusions is they should eliminate this tax loophole for senior executives and make everyone subject to the same rules. It shouldn't matter what your job is. What your job is shouldn't depend on or determine how much you pay in taxes.
I mean, because, you know, I got to tell you, Scott, you know, and I didn't realize that there was this difference. I thought everybody, you know, 401k, that it was capped out. You know, I'm over 50, so it's capped out at like 28, 29 grand. That's the most you can put in. I thought that was for everyone. You know, I thought that was just the whole 401k thing. You're blowing my mind that there's someone who makes a lot more money than I do, can get that tax deferment that I get. It just blows my mind, and I can't understand why that would happen. Now, what do you say to the person who says, well, you know, they're going to pay taxes on that money down the road? Because I take the deduction now, I put it in the 401k, it comes off my yearly income because I plan on making less money in retirement than I'm making now. So that's kind of the deal. They're going to pay taxes on this money down the road, right?
Not necessarily. So one thing that a lot of CEOs do if they're in a high tax state like New York, California, they will retire to a low tax state like Florida. And then where they don't tax income. So they get, first of all, they get all the state taxes they would have paid in New York or California forgiven forever. The other thing that often happens is it goes into their estate, and then when it passes to their children, their heirs, they get a lot of tax breaks, and in many cases can set it up in a way where they don't pay any estate taxes. And when it passes at time of death, the cost basis of it goes. There's any gains on it are wiped out, presumably because estate taxes will be paid. But if you skip the estate taxes, then it just becomes another big win.
Wow. And this should infuriate people, especially, you know, because we know there's a retirement tsunami coming. We know a large percentage of the country has virtually no retirement savings whatsoever, and you know those numbers much better than I do. You know, I'm fortunate. I've got a union gig that we've got a defined benefit pension, and I have the ability to contribute to a 401k. Not every worker is that fortunate. Like I said, a lot of people have nothing and are going to rely on Social Security, which we haven't shored up. And so to hear that we're giving these multimillionaires another tax break to avoid paying taxes is just infuriating.
Yeah, so part of, you mentioned defined benefit plan. That's a pension plan where you get a fixed check every month when you turn 65. And those used to be far more common than they are today. In 1990, 35% of American workers were fortunate enough to have that kind of a plan. Most of them are unionized. Today, that's down to 12%, so 2/3 less than just 30 years ago. So that's part of it. And one of the reasons companies did that is because when the stock market falls with a defined benefit plan, they're on the hook to make up the losses. Today, the worker's on the hook for those losses. And in fact, last year, when the markets were down, Fidelity Investments said their average 401k dropped in value 20%. So an older worker who's approaching retirement or someone who's in retirement, you know, suddenly saw a lot of their retirement savings evaporate in 2022. The other thing I just wanted to mention is today a new report from Gallup came out, a poll that asked workers their outlook on retirement, and it hit an 11-year low. 88% of lower income Americans say they're worried about having enough money to retire. And in general, only 43%, including more affluent workers, think they'll have a decent retirement. So this is an enormous retirement crisis. Meanwhile, those at the top who are benefiting from cutting, you know, lots of things for workers, including their retirement benefits and boosting their own pay as a result, are looking at very lavish retirements.
So how do we fix this? I mean, as we've said a moment ago, as I said a moment ago, we're heading towards a retirement tsunami. There are a lot of people who, especially my age, who have virtually nothing saved for retirement outside of depending on Social Security. Is there a way to catch up? Is there a way to help fix some of this? I know the report isn't meant to do that, but there's got to be some way forward to help. And I'm sure not giving massive tax breaks to the very wealthy. Again, I'm sure that's not the answer. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, so there's a whole section at the end of the report that has some solutions. One obvious one is to eliminate this tax break for executives and treat everyone the same, regardless of the work they do. But another big one is looking at Social Security. The median Social Security check last month was $1,754. It's not many places in the country where you could live on that if that's all you have, and roughly 40% of Americans, that's mostly all they have when they retire. But yet Social Security is capped. If you make more than $160,000, you only pay payroll taxes on that first $160,000. For a millionaire, that tax is paid off in February. So at the least, we should raise that cap, and many of us think we should eliminate it altogether. That would generate enormous new money for Social Security, would help strengthen the longevity of the fund, as well as provide more resources for those without other retirement assets to get some expansion in their Social Security.
It's amazing. But I was reading through your study, and you pointed out nationwide. This one blew my mind. Nationwide, just 35% of working age adults had tax deferred 401k type contribution plans. Another 13% had defined benefits or cash balance plans. Some 42% of Americans aged 56 to 64 have zero. Nationwide is one of the companies that don't they do this? Isn't this what they do? And to have so few of their employees in doing this, it seems something wrong there.
Yep. They're an insurance company, and so they do have investments, and it's crazy. One of the companies is Centene, which is the largest Medicaid provider in the country. So they're getting all this taxpayer money to run their business, and then they're larding their CEO with a pension deferred pension account of $328 million. Defense industry is the same way. There's a lot of very, very large CEO deferred comp plans where their revenues all coming from taxpayers.
Just another example of working people getting screwed again. So let me ask you, Scott, you're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Scott Klinger, Senior Equitable Development Specialist with Jobs with Justice, jwj.org, their website, if you want to take a look at this report titled A Tale of Two Retirements. We'll get links out on social media. How do we come back to some bit of fairness? Look, I'm a union guy. I think workers joining and forming unions, demanding those defined benefit pensions, but also sitting across the table from someone like these CEOs that you've pointed out, and pointing out the fact that they've got these kind of things that they're denying their workers. That to me seems the number one reason you'd want to join a union. Are any of the companies that you looked at unionized?
I don't believe so. It's a good question, and we should have taken a deeper dive in that. I guess some probably have some unions, some of the drug companies, perhaps, but we tended to look at low wage employers, so they wouldn't likely have unions.
So what do we do with this? Now I hope everyone's as angry as I am. What do we do with this? What's the marching order?
Well, for sure, contact your legislators and ask them to raise the cap on Social Security so that more people can have a raise in their Social Security. We're all clear that $100 million a month pension for a CEO is too much, but I hope we all agree that $1,700 for the average Social Security recipient is too little, and that's the biggest thing we can do to balance. We could close the loophole on CEOs, and that raises a couple $2 billion a year, but it's not going to solve the problem. It solves the perception problem and the way that CEOs feel that they're somehow special and different from those who make the money for their companies through their work. And I think the reason we did this is exactly what you said, to get people angry, to give workers evidence, that they're getting screwed, to rile them up and hopefully get them to organize.
And get the pitchforks out. But Scott, I appreciate the time. A great report. I'd love to talk to you again as we go down the road. But good stuff, man.
Thanks so much, Rick. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks so much, Scott Klinger. He is the Senior Equitable Development Specialist there at Jobs with Justice, jwj.org, the website, if you want to take a look at that. Going to take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
It's infuriating to me when you look at the numbers. You look at that, almost half of this country's got nothing save for retirement security, which means that they're hoping and praying Social Security is going to hang around and be there. And you've got a Republican Party hell bent on destroying it. Now remember, the idea is we got to destroy it so we can save it. We've got to gut the benefit, we've got to cut it down, we've got to make it farther to down the road to get much more elusive. So people they're going to be working into their 70s. Well, they're going to live in this. Look, I know people who do physical manual jobs. They're trying to get through their 50s, let alone through their entire 60s and into their 70s to retire. Look, if your job is pushing paper in an office, maybe you can do that to 70. Maybe you can put up with people's nonsense that long. But there's got to be a pathway to retirement. And this is another one of those things that just infuriates me. That you have, again, the wealth class rigging the game to protect themselves, putting hundreds of millions of dollars in deferred compensation plans. So they're taking the tax break now, and as Scott Klinger pointed out, eventually you manipulate it enough, they might get away with not paying any tax whatsoever. That's what's just mind-blowing. And you look at some of these things that our CEO class has gotten, and this is why I'm such a big supporter of labor unions. Sitting across the table from those people saying, hey, we can't afford a nickel an hour raise. We can't afford to help contribute to a pension plan. We can't, make things safer. We can't do all this stuff because we've got to feed our own pot. Sit down across from the table from somebody who does that. Hold them accountable on a certain level. But more importantly, we need to get our heads straight. We need to get our heads straight electorally. Because all of this stuff happened because we kept electing people who were business friendly. This was all by design. The whole move from a defined benefit pension to a 401k was a great sales job. It was a great marketing gig. We're all going to be rich. I remember I was probably 25 when I started working at this particular place. And they said, you stay here 30 years. 30 years. And you can retire in 30 years with $1 million. And I remember going, well, if that's the case, a loaf of bread is probably going to be $10,000 because they're not going to give a dumb truck driver $1 million. It'll either be worthless or it ain't going to happen. And the reality is they fell about 2/3 short. Because again, the market knows how to manipulate. The wealth class knows how to borrow from the workers. And there has been a massive redistribution of wealth from working people to the wealthy. And this is just another one of those ways. But they sold us. They sold us hey, we're all going to be millionaires. Instead of going, you know what, we use a pension system to ensure people can live out their final days with dignity. I look at my grandparents. They had the three-legged stool. They had Social Security as the base. They had their defined benefit union pension as the base, and they had a little bit of savings. They had a solid three-legged stool, and they lived out their years in their home with dignity and respect. How many people are going to be able to do that going forward? As they're destroying Medicare, as they're going after trying to diminish that, the ability for working people to retire is getting much harder. And this should be one of those things that we come together on. This should be one of those things that we take off our red hats and blue hats. This should be one of those things where we're going, we should have a system to ensure that working people aren't getting screwed over. And this is one of my favorite parts of my MAGA friends. Because when I talk to my MAGA friends about this issue, especially this, they're on the wrong side of the track. There's most of them that I know are struggling. They're the ones in the zero and the 10,000, 15,000 in their 401ks. Which is why, and this makes sense now, because there was a statistic that I saw not too long ago that said the average 401k in the country was about $18,000. It makes sense. When 46% of people have zero, and you got a handful of people who've got $300-400 million, kind of makes sense. It's like the Robert Reich bit with when him if him and Shaquille O'Neal are in the same room, their average height is about 6 foot because he's a small little guy. It makes sense. So when do we say enough is enough? And when do we start electing people who are going to say, you know what, we do care about your family and the economy. We're not going to hold the country hostage every time we get a bug up our behinds, or when we want to get our pound of flesh. But actually a system that encourages the ability of people to be able to retire. Am I surprised that the polling says that people are worried they're never going to retire? No. We've been doing this for 40 years. This is what neoliberalism brought us. This is what supply-side voodoo Reaganomics brought us. This corporate dominance, this swing towards whatever business wants and needs, business gets. And the working people, sorry, better luck next time. So I hope you take a look at the report, A Tale of Two Retirements. And oh, by the way, do yourself a favor. If you really want to get upset, look up Jack Welch's divorce and see what he was getting from GE. All kinds of perks, just obscene kinds of things. The fact that anyone would even ask for that kind of stuff is amazing to me, let alone being able to get it. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1949. That was the day that a shotgun blast broke through a closed window and struck Victor Reuther as he sat reading a newspaper in his living room. Victor, along with his brothers Walter and Roy, were leaders of the United Auto Workers Union, one of the most powerful forces of the 20th century U.S. labor movement. During the 1930s, the three brothers moved to Detroit and became involved in the hard-fought efforts to bring unions to the Motor City. Victor got a job at the Kesley Hayes Wheel Company. He joined UAW Local 174. During the Flint sit-down strike against General Motors, Victor gave speeches to help rally the strikers. According to Mike Smith of Wayne State University, Victor, quote, had this deep resonating voice He coupled that with a superb control of the language. And when he got up to give a speech, it was usually a beauty. Victor would go on to become the UAW's education director and international director. Roy took up the role of legislative director. Walter became the union's president. Their union leadership made many enemies for the three Ruther brothers. Walter was the victim of a gunshot attack in 1948 that permanently injured one of his arms. The next year, an unknown would-be assassin took aim at Victor. The blast hit Victor in the face. He lost his right eye, and the bullet smashed his jaw and collarbone. In his memoir, Victor wrote that he told the surgeon, quote, "They can take out my eye and take of an arm or a leg, but please fix up my tongue. I've got a living to make." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
I was standing by gate 4 when I heard the people roar. They ain't gonna kick the auto workers around. It's that UAW-CIO.
It's an odd marketing strategy for an industry to assail its own customers. Yet, that's what the monopolistic meatpacking industry, led by such huge conglomerates as Tyson, Smithfield, JBS, and Hormel, that control nearly 70% of America's pork market, is doing. Just shut up and eat your bacon, the industry shrieks. The target of their corporate tantrum is the growing grassroots movement of consumers, animal rights advocates, farmers, and others who are dismayed and disgusted by big pork's profiteering on animal cruelty. None of your business, shout the executives, lobbyists, lawyers, and far-rent politicians who run the torturous system. But gutsy groups like the Humane Society made their way inside the industry's animal factories, videoing such mass horrors as thousands of pregnant sows locked for 16 weeks at a time in gestation crates so small the animals can't even turn around. In 2018, such exposés prompted 60% of California voters to approve a ballot initiative outlawing the use of these inhumane crates. Adding plutocratic stupidity to their greed, the pork barons then sued the people for overreaching their power. Yes, the pork profiteers actually asserted that democracy, i.e. people power, must not interfere with, quote, sound business practices. Never mind that few of us uncorporatized commoners consider animal suffering to be a sound practice. Even the corporate coddling Supreme Court gagged at the industry's claim that it has the sovereign power to dictate what type of pork chops are available to the public. This month, in an odd-fellow 5-4 decision rendered by 2 progressive judges and 3 corporatists, the court ruled that policy choices like these usually belong to the people. Well, yes, and to the animals. This is Jim Hightower saying, here's an example of how grassroots activism matters in important ways. To stay involved, go to humanesociety.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, big Supreme Court case coming up, this Moore versus Harper. All on the topic of gerrymandering. And the thing is you look at some of the more interesting map drawing that they've done across the country. Pennsylvania, my state, right at the very front of it. Fortunately, our Supreme Court shot those down. But in North Carolina, they shot them down. Now, well, they want to go back and say, no, we think we should be able to gerrymander any way we want. Which is why I think it's important to talk about this issue, understand what it is, and maybe get behind some marching orders to fight and make things better. That's why I've asked Robert Millman to come talk with us. He's a filmmaker and activist. He's got a film out on this very topic, one that I think folks should take a look at. Check out the website, lineinthestreet.com. Robert, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So let's start with, what is gerrymandering? How do you define this?
Well, let me just go with the term gerrymandering for just a second, because this is something that occurred to me just recently. The term itself, I've decided to try to use the gerrymander math cheat as the way to describe it. Because just calling it gerrymandering kind of makes it like a victimless crime, like mistakes were made, like collateral damage. But with the gerrymander math cheat, there are always perpetrators and there are victims. But it's really just a simple math cheat. And in the film I made, which anybody can see at no charge if they go to that site, the opening 2 minutes show a really concise way to show the math cheat. And I invite anybody to look at it. I invite anybody to try it because it's really very simple. Shall I explain it?
Sure, please, by all means.
If you take 50 dimes and you take 50 pennies and you get a big piece of paper from Target or Walmart or wherever you get a big piece of paper and lay it down on your kitchen table and put the pennies and dimes down, you have a representation of a 50-50 electorate. You can mess them around, turn them around any which way. You get 2 pens, one red, one blue, and then you just start drawing lines. And if those coins are set to represent 10 voting districts, 100 coins, that means 10 coins in each district. You can draw a district that if you're the pennies and you want to cheat the dimes, you can draw the district so you put 10 dimes in one district and you put 10 dimes in another district. So you've used up 40% of the opposition and given them 2 districts. Right. You can win the other 8, I should say. And anybody can try it. It's remarkably consistent. And the thing I've seen a lot is that people that are smart sometimes really don't understand how devastating this simple but abstract math cheat is.
No, you're right. And look, Pennsylvania, the state that I live in, the 1 year Democrats had more, I think like 500,000 more voters. And somehow Republicans won 13 of the 18 congressional districts. It's just what you're talking about. They drew the lines in such a way that they packed Democrats into a few districts, and then they spattered them around for the rest.
That exact example is in the film. 50.8% of the votes, 28% of the representation.
So the question then becomes, because, I've said before, I'm not opposed to the idea of gerrymandering if the goal is to have competitive districts. Now, I know that's never going to happen, but, I would like to believe that, we should be talking about ideas and all of that instead of, which one can draw the reddest district or the bluest district, because this doesn't help us. None of this current system helps democracy, helps voters. It doesn't excite voters to go to the polls. So what should we be doing then, as opposed to this? Because look, the Supreme Court case, I fully expect to go the wrong way. I fully expect them to anoint gerrymandering as the wave of the future. Or I guess I should ask you: do you fear the same thing?
Oh, I don't know what SCOTUS is going to do. But I do know that the decision reached by the Pennsylvania court in that 2018 decision was brilliant in its simplicity. And what they said was compact and contiguous, so they have to be, fairly tight. But the real genius of it was they said, do not divide any city, county, town, borough, township, or ward except where necessary to achieve equality of population. Now, that's the actual language. But what it said is you have to make the fewest cuts to political subdivisions. And that's brilliant in its simplicity because it is completely nonpartisan. And it says just make the fewest splits possible. It's an easily measurable thing. I mean, all this maptitude and gerrymandering software that relies on voluminous personal data that knows 100 data points about your life, they can certainly use the same software to calculate the fewest splits needed. And it was a simple, nonpartisan metric. It was resisted mightily by the state legislature, but it ended up working and reflecting the actual state's electorate, and it flipped 4 votes. Made it a 9-9 state instead of a 13-5 state.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, if democracy is the goal and voting matters, You would want competitive districts as opposed to what they keep getting away with. And that's how we end up with such bad legislation. That's how it ends up that working people don't get their needs addressed, and how corporate America seems to always get whatever they want. And it's no wonder we end up in the situation we're in.
Well, one of the things that I try to do with the film, and I try to do every time I speak about it, is try to reduce what is a complex issue. And the people who benefit from it and defend it like to keep it complex because it's a way to change the subject. But it's actually very simple. It's a simple math cheat, and your explicit individual right to vote is written down in plain language in all 50 state constitutions,
right?
Along with variations in phrasing, equal treatment. Sorting and selecting your voters to predetermine election results, by definition, is unequal treatment.
So let me ask you this, because I think most people want fair. I think they want fairness. Why is it that we allow legislators to do this? I mean, the old phrase of, they're picking their voters instead of their voters picking them. Why do we allow this to happen? I was arguing a while ago. I was going, why don't we just randomly pick a third grade class with a box of crayons and a map? I'm sure they would do a much better job than our legislatures do. What should be the way forward in drawing these maps?
Well, generally, it comes down to two issues: the who and the how. Who draws the maps, and how do they draw the maps? A number of states have redistricting commissions. New York State actually has a redistricting commission. Most states that gerrymander don't, and they have rigged state courts, rigged state Supreme Courts. So, to me, the entire point of representative democracy is the idea of having a kind of a judgment of the value of ideas, where everybody gets a way to have not exactly equal. I'm not looking for perfection, but just some basic rules. The way gerrymandering works now, it's like there's a World Series, and one team wins, and after they win, every game after that, they get 5 outs at bat, and the other team gets 3. Now, how do you think that's going to work out? And that really is where we are out. And unless we have some really enforced, simple guidelines, and again, I thought the Pennsylvania Supreme Court was brilliant in its simplicity.
Right. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Robert Millman. Robert's a filmmaker and activist. He's got a film out. You can find that at lineinthestreet.com, lineinthestreet.com. We'll get links out on social media. What made you do this? I mean, I know you're a filmmaker. What made you take this on? Why is this important to you?
Patriotism. I think it's important. I mean, I can't exactly explain it, but I think that I have some gifts. Everybody has some gifts, and you have to pay it forward. You have to do the right thing. I believe in the concept of proportional representation. For God's sake, Article 1 of the United States Constitution says representatives shall be apportioned. I mean, they mentioned proportional representation in the First Amendment. The First Amendment, for God's sake. And but it kind of ran away from us. At first, it was sort of wink and a nod. It'll reset itself. But the fact is, everybody has a cell phone. Everybody has a data trail. And you know what? Amazon knows where your front door is. The detail with which they can sort and select voters is frightening. And there are a number of different guidelines that have been suggested, and certainly I think independent commissions make sense and get people who are not just fighting for their party, but who, independents as well. And that being the who, But the how, to me, the simplest one is make the fewest splits.
Yeah, no, that's good. What kind of response have you gotten? Because what I love about what you've done is the simplicity. You've got it cut up into nice little bits. It's easy to digest, really easy to understand. What kind of responses have you been getting?
Well, I'm kind of riding a wave right now. Thank you very much for having me on. It's been a long time coming. I started shooting this film in 2017, and I've been wailing on it relentlessly. But I know what winning tastes like. Winning tastes good. And New York State votes on paper ballots because myself and a bunch of other dedicated activists were just relentless about it. And by the same, this was sort of a much smaller notion, but there was a group that wanted to put a power plant next to our school system in the town where I live. And a small group of dedicated activists just were relentless, and relentless wins. So I've been at this for 5 years now, and maybe I'm finally in the right place at the right time.
I hope people will take a look at it and get active in it, because ultimately this is something we should be voting on. This is something that I look at Ohio, and Ohio is an interesting story because they evidently they're not following the rules that their own commissions put out, and they're running on maps that weren't approved, that their Supreme Court threw back to them several times. I mean, it's a mess what's going on in Ohio. And what's frightening to me is that the voters don't seem to really hold the people accountable. I would think that given what happened in Ohio, everybody would throw the bums out because they're clearly not doing their job. But it's sadly come down to this power, red hat, blue hat power struggle that's going on. How do we fix that?
All I know is that relentless wins. And that what you're talking about in Ohio speaks directly to the Moore v. Harper case, which is really just state legislators saying, I don't have to pay any attention to the state constitution. Yeah, I swore to uphold and defend it, but I don't have to. And it's really that simple. And it's almost beyond words to me that the state legislators in North Carolina with Moore v. Harper are asking the Supreme Court of the United States to use the power of judicial review to deny the power of judicial review to state courts that enforce the state constitutions.
Yep.
And back in 2019, Rucho, the Supreme Court said, well, elections aren't our business, they're state business. So if they're going to turn around and now say it is state business, that's I don't even know where to go with it. Truly.
I don't either, because these are the people who tell us that they believe in states' rights. Most of these people are our 10th Amendment friends who, well, states' rights, arguing that we shouldn't be following state courts, which is weird to me.
Well, I mean, to me, it's Citizens United made the argument that money is speech. And this is about money that is being spent in elections. And in Rucho v. Common Cause, which was the North Carolina gerrymander case of 2019, they said, well, vote suppression, that's just not my business. So voting is speech, yes, well, maybe not, because money is speech, according to SCOTUS. But as far as voting is concerned, they don't seem to think so. They just said, not my job.
Most certainly going to be interesting to see how this case turns out, but I hope folks will take a look at the movie. We'll get links out. Lineinthestreet.com is the website. I want you to take a look at that. And Robert, I appreciate you taking time for us. Good on you for making this. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again, especially as the Supreme Court case makes its rounds.
Very good. Thank you. And relentless wins.
There you go. I agree. Thank you, Robert Millman. Appreciate the time. Filmmaker, activist. Lineinthestreet.com. Check out the website. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1883. The eighth wonder of the world, the Brooklyn Bridge, opened for traffic. 600 men worked on the project, which took 14 years to complete. Between 20 and 30 men died working on the bridge. This included the bridge's designer, German-born John A. Roebling. Roebling was visiting the site, taking compass readings, when his foot was accidentally crushed. And although his toes were amputated, he later died of tetanus. Some of the most harrowing work for the project had to be completed under the East River. The bridge's stone towers were to stand on top of caissons. These were wooden boxes with no bottoms that would be filled with concrete. Men known as sandhogs had the job of digging until they hit bedrock to rest the caissons. The underwater boxes were dimly lit by gas lights. If the sandhogs came up too quickly, they risked getting the bends. A 15-year-old Irish immigrant described the work saying, "When the air was fully compressed, the door of the airlock opened at a touch, and we all went down to work with pick and shovel on the gravelly bottom. My headache soon became acute. The 6 of us were working naked to the waist in a small iron chamber with a temperature of about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. In 5 minutes, the sweat was pouring from us, and all the while we were standing in icy water that was only kept from rising by the terrific air pressure. No wonder the headaches were blinding." Due to this incredible labor, the bridge finally opened. In the first 24 hours, 150,000 people crossed the new bridge. More than 125 years later, the Brooklyn Bridge still stands as one of the most iconic man-made structures in the U.S. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, ricksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I love crazy, and today's been kind of a crazy day on some of this stuff. I look at this Candace Taylor. You may remember her. She ran for, I don't remember, governor, Senate. She ran for something. She's now been elected as a Republican district chair in Georgia. Evidently, she was on the very unknown Jesus, Guns, and Babies podcast. Because you remember her? She was the Jesus, Guns, Babies person, of course. But she's on the podcast, and she said, quote, because she's talking about globes. First, I thought, she was talking about, never mind. She says, all the globes everywhere. I turn on the TV. There's globes in the backyard, in the background. Every time there's globes. Everywhere there's globes. You see them all the time. It's constant. My children will be like, "Mama, globe, 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 globe." They're everywhere. Globes everywhere. That's what they do to brainwash. For me, if it's not a conspiracy, if it is real, why are you pushing so hard everywhere I go? Every store, you buy a globe. There are globes everywhere. Every movie, TV show, news media. Why? More and more, I'm like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that there are globes. And the only thing that comes up is that she's a flat earther. And I didn't know that these people actually exist. I really didn't. But this woman, evidently there's a globe conspiracy that they have globes all over the place. They're indoctrinating us to believe that the planet is round. And these are people who are running for political office. I mean, this is the scary thing. These are people who want and are seeking power. Power over our children, power over our policy, power over us. And it used to be that someone who said something crazy like this, there used to be a van that would pull up with people all dressed in white with a fancy jacket for them. But no, we give them platforms, and we give them district chairs in the Republican Party. Because this, my friends, this is who the Republican Party is. And I said this the other day. I was on WCPT in Chicago, and I was on Joan Esposito's show, and I was talking about, how I used to have faith in women taking over. I used to go, when women take over, it'll be better because they're more compassionate, more empathetic. They're smarter than men. Go down the list. The qualities are all there for good leadership. I'm now rethinking that based on all of the insanity that I see coming out of all of these Moms for Liberty groups, all of these, what's the Carrie Lake woman who everyone wants to be Trump's VP, this crackpot. It's kind of worrisome that the kid who finished, or didn't, or dropped out, went and got the GED. Because evidently, according to GED math, having a child is cheaper than birth control, which is just frighteningly scary. That someone with that lack of insight, intellect, or just common sense is sitting in our Congress. I got to tell you, the silent majority have to speak up. If we're going to save this country from insanity, if we're going to save this country from these kind of folks, we got a lot of work to do. And yet all we focus on is what divides us. Because that's the outrage candy we're thrown. We're literally talking about if the planet is flat again. This is how far back they're taking us. There are people literally who believe the earth is flat. And this is where my mind goes. If it is flat, just keep walking. Hopefully you fall off the edge. And if you don't, you'll come back around the other way, then you'll know it's not. Finally, every parent's nightmare. I'm not a big fan of Kellyanne Conway, but evidently her daughter, Claudia, is now 18. And yeah, Claudia is doing some Playboy stuff. Evidently, she got a new gig creating what they call salacious content over at Playboy.com. They don't do the magazine anymore. They don't print stuff anymore. So I'm guessing, this is her gig. I hope my daughters don't hate me this much. But wow, sad. Feel sorry for them. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, anything at all, past, present, also in the future, make sure you grab the podcast. Never miss an episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working